We have been hearing across the industry that summer staff don't seem to be quite as in shape as they used to be. That is, perhaps they don't have the stamina to make it through the physical and emotional labor of the summer. Let's talk about the training they need to get pumped to do their personal best.
You don't lead camp because you love the office. Ultra Camp has everything you need to manage your program so you can spend more time doing what you love. Manage staff, register campers, take payments, and direct communication all in one place.
Welcome to Camp Code, a podcast brought to you by Go Camp Pro. We've seen a lot of changes in our industry over the last 10 years since our podcasting adventure first began. The landscape certainly looks very different as we head into the 2023 camp season. And yet the importance of well thought out staff training remains the same. This season, we'll dive into new topics, new ideas for skill development, coping strategies, and ways to support our staff to bring their very best. Yes, the what has certainly changed in the last 10 years, but the why remains the same. All right, folks, before we get started, let's just introduce ourselves. So Ruby, could you go first, please?
Sure thing. My name is Ruby Compton. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Chief Exploration Officer of Ruby Outdoors. I run a training and support business in Western North Carolina in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains, but I do work all over the world.
Thank you so much. All right, Gabs, how about you?
Well, my name is Gabrielle Rail, and I'm one of the camp directors of Camp Waro. My pronouns are she, her, and Camp Waro is an all-girls camp in the Laurentian Mountains, and we focus on creating a positive community for gender minorities.
Thanks, Gab. And I'm Beth Allison. I'm co-owner of Camp Packer and Go Camp Pro. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a camp consultant and a trainer who loves talking about leadership training. Welcome to Camp Code, folks. We have been asked by one of our listeners to talk about staff stamina. So we know working with kids is hard for any kind of program that you run. And at overnight camp, it doesn't end at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m., giving staff a bit of a break and time to process before it begins again the next day. And it's a lot to ask. Both day and overnight camps are a lot to ask of our staff. So how do we prepare them and then deal with things when our staff seem to just want to hang out with their friends in the courtyard and not with the campers, or hang out with their friends at the beach? When we received this podcast idea, we decided for us that it had two parts: energy and motivation. So we're first going to discuss energy. How do we ensure that our staff have enough in the tank to feel like they can give to their campers all day, and in the case of overnight camps, all night? So Ruby, how about you start us off today? How do we ensure staff have enough energy to be with our kids?
Well, I want to lean on to the teaching from I believe the book is called The Productivity Project. I'll look it up. I'll know what it is for sure in the next round. But it was a productivity book I read that talked about kind of the three areas that you manage when you're actually trying to be more productive. And energy is a big category there. It's hard to get a bunch of stuff done when you're feeling particularly low energy. And another piece that ties into that is we are not physically capable of multitasking. And what do we do at camp? We multitask
All day.
all day. And so if you're like, gosh, it's really annoying that our staff can't seem to have the capacity to hold all this stuff, it's because A, we as humans don't do that very well. And B, we got to teach them how to do that and what that looks like. And the reality is it's not actually doing lots of stuff at lots of different times. Or at the same time, it is about being able to shift your focus very quickly. And so if you think about when you are trying to get several things done, right? Whatever you focus on is what you're doing and it's what you're taking care of. And sometimes it takes a long time to transition out of that and into something else. Sometimes we can do it really, really quickly. Sometimes we have to do it really quickly, right? Oh my gosh, there's a fire. You have to turn your focus to that thing. And at camp, there's all these times that we're asking folks to shift their focus very rapidly without much lead in or lead out time. And Some might call that multitasking, but I think take that term away and say it's not multitasking. It's about focusing your energy and your efforts in certain places at certain times. So what's the practical application of that? Well, one, I think it's giving folks practice with that, giving them practice with shifting their focus and their energy and where their energy is being put towards during staff training, and have them practice that function over and over again, and have them reflect on that. I also think helping them identify what are the things that I need more lead-in time for, what are the things that I can kind of snap focus here and there really, really quickly. And have your staff talk about, your return staff, have them talk about how do you like supervise a group of kids, but not necessarily be the one who's directing the learning, right? I've talked about on the podcast before, like the parent that sits on the beach and is reading the book, but is also watching their child play in the sand or play in the water, and how you can't physically read the sentences and watch all those things at the same time. So how does that work, and how does that play out at camp? I think that skill, teaching staff the skill of like supervising by proximity and supervising while letting the kids have some self-directed play when that is appropriate and what times a day that is appropriate. I think that's a critical skill to be teaching staff that they really don't have right now. So teach them to shift focus, and that's something they're going to have to do a fair amount, and get them to practice that skill throughout staff training.
That's great. And I think even just talking about it, like even acknowledging that this is how you're going to feel and this is what's happening, and that you're not technically multitasking. I think that's just a great conversation to have with staff. So thanks for that, Ruby. Okay, Gabs, how about you? How do you make sure your staff has enough energy to make it through 24 hours at camp?
Yeah.
Over and over and over again, by the way.
Well, so I think there's, where do we lose energy? So we know that obviously sleep is important, et cetera, but where's energy getting lost? A lot of times energy are getting lost in two areas. One, when there is rest time and there's a feeling of guilt, or I should be doing something else at this time. That can also lead into I should be with my friends at this time. And so in those areas, when we're worried about other things during our rest time, we're actually not resting. So again, this is acknowledging it with our staff, probably having a conversation, talking about FOMO, talking about what that means to them, and providing alone time where we're practicing with everybody that rest time. A lot of staff also don't know how to rest well. And what is resting well? That's helping your brain quiet down. That's helping, focusing on our breathing. Am I talking about meditation? Maybe some form of it, but having some quiet time during your staff training planned in, even if it's 15 minutes, can get them practicing it and then reflecting back on what that experience was like for them. Now, for some of your staff members, they might get anxious during this time. They might say like, I didn't know what to do with myself. And we're not there to like fix all of those issues. We're just there to help reflect back onto them and saying, oh, that's unfortunate. And what are some things that you could do next time? Because we're running a marathon. So this is a key element of learning. So one, this is an energy drain, and to try to get rid of that sort of guilt aspect. The other piece is there was a study that was done, and I can't really remember exactly where, but I know that had to do with the Army, and it had to do with the soldiers saying how tired they were. And so they shifted their sleeping patterns. They made sure they had more hours and in the day and at night. The percentage of saying that they were tired barely moved, even with much more time to sleep. So what it really came down to was loneliness. And so loneliness can really take away energy. So feeling connected to people. This is why emphasizing team activities in your first 72 hours of training, at least, where people feel like they belong, that names are being used intentionally by your leadership team members. Hi, Beth. It's so nice to see you. How was your afternoon, Beth? I mean, we don't want to get too freaky about it, but here we go. but really, really pushing that sort of connection piece. And we're trying to make sure that loneliness it's not, doesn't happen to our staff. And the first 72 hours is where I would really put an emphasis on feeling like this is their home and connecting to others.
I love that. That's really interesting. I'm going to focus a few more on practicalities here. So number one, I think it's imperative that they understand the expectations of the job. And we've talked about this many, many, many times. So in your applications, your interviews, your TikTok videos, your Instagram pages, all of your communication with staff and or future staff, you have to be explicitly clear about what the job entails. There should be no surprises when they arrive at camp. How many hours a day are they expected to be with campers? How many hours off do they get a day or a week? What does camp need them to be doing in each of the program areas in each of those parts of the day? Be honest with them. You are only setting yourself up for challenges or failure if you paint this rosy picture of smiling children's faces and staff laughing with one another, and that's all you talk about. You can use staff testimonials in the staff section of your website, have your alumni or your current staff share the hardest parts of the days or nights and how they pace themselves or how they dug deep for the energy required or the joy that they found in the job. Should you have to take them aside during the summer to talk to them about spending too much time on their phones or with other staff and not with the campers, you have all these expectations to fall back on because you've always been incredibly clear. Another practical thing for energy, feed them right. Nobody can run around after kids with just coffee in the morning, no matter what they tell you. Or only carbs and sugars for lunches and dinners. So I would run a really quick session, again, 15, 20 minutes during training about the kind of energy we get from foods and the ones that drain us midday. Ensure that you and your kitchen manager are on the same page so that there's lots of nutritious options available at meals, plus snacks throughout the day, even if it's just a bowl of fruit in the dining hall that they can find anytime. And don't forget to let them know that they're going to likely need a lot more food than they're used to. If they've been spending the other part of the year studying at school and perhaps not being as physically active as they are at camp, they're going to find out they're a lot hungrier and that they need to eat more. A full day's activity coupled with a lot of fresh air makes folks hungry. And ensure that they're hydrating properly so they don't feel like they're dragging. Dehydrated and hungry people find it hard to even think about having the right kind of energy to play all day or be connected with kids all day, let alone actually have it. And let them rest. Ruby has said this before a number of times, but please do not hold staff meetings during rest hour. Give them a chance to actually process their morning and rest for a bit before they head off into their afternoons. Figure out a different time of day to do that sort of thing. And along with some of the techniques Gabs was talking about processing and resting, have somebody come in and talk about good sleep techniques, whether you're an overnight or a day camp. Maybe you can do this if you want through TikTok videos or Instas, whatever, but sleep hygiene is incredibly important. So create one together that works for your camp schedule and for your environment, like sticking to a sleep schedule, setting aside adequate hours at night for sleep for staff, paying attention to what you eat and drink. Encourage them not to go to bed super stuffed or super hungry, or that's when they go to their, I don't know, the staff lounge and just fill themselves full of chocolate. Creating the restful environment, keeping their rooms cool and dark and quiet. And if you're an overnight operation, do your cabins have fans or AC for those hot, humid nights? Explaining the importance of not having those devices on right before you go to bed, teaching them how to manage stress and worries. And that we're back to Gabs with the meditation or the journaling or checking in with supervisors so that they're ensuring that they're handling those stressors well. And if your staff is around the clock at an overnight camp, I think we need to try to ensure that they have more than 1 hour off a day from campers. I mean, that's the traditional times that we've had for decades. But if your camp offers 1 hour a day off, what other times do they have when they're not expected to be on? And be sure that you explain this clearly during training. You can hand out your daily schedule and ask them whether, I don't know, pairs or small groups to either color code your day and your evening, if that's your camp program, or maybe you give each time of day a number. So when do you have to be a bit more, when do you have that adult time with other staff? You can mark that as a number 3. When do you have sort of alone time? Mark that with a number 2. And probably there won't be very many of those at summer camp, and when you need to be acting with kids and watching out for campers, you want to mark those with a number 1 and take up those answers. And it may very well be that not everybody's going to have all the same answers. So you can have a quick discussion about that, explaining your expectations and the why behind them. And then when you get into a situation like you're all gathered in the courtyard before meals and you see staff is all chatting with one another instead of their campers, and the campers look like they'd rather have the staff there, you can simply walk by and hold up one finger, maybe like against your shoulder or your chest, very subtly as a reminder that this is number 1 time. And of course, you'll have practiced that with your staff during staff training, so they'll know what that means and they won't just think like you're itchy or something over there. But just some sort of hint to say, remember, we talked about this. This is the time when you want to be with your kids. And maybe those are also times in the day when kids don't want the staff around. They want them back a little bit so that they can have the opportunity to have those camper experiences. But you just want to make sure they understand those expectations. All right, we're going to stop for a break to hear from our amazing sponsor. And when we come back, we're going to share our ideas on how to give staff the motivation to be with kids around the clock.
Exclusive to Camp Code listeners, discover the 10 best marketing tools and tips for camp by visiting ultracampmanagement.com/campcode and downloading UltraCamp's free guide, The Marketing Toolbox. Do you remember why you chose to get into the camping world? UltraCamp knows it wasn't because you loved paperwork. That's why they built a platform that's as flexible and affordable as it is powerful, so you can keep your program moving forward. UltraCamp offers pricing that is transparent and flexible, and it means you can rest easy and focus on what's important, your campers. They have low minimum entry, clear pricing with no hidden costs, flexible payment terms, and no long-term contracts. UltraCamp's goal is to help their clients spend less time in the office and more time doing what they love. Want to know if UltraCamp is the right fit for you? You can have a free customized demo session where you can see their software in action, and you can sign up for that at ultracampmanagement.com/campcode.
And we're back. All right. So in the second half, we want to talk about how we actually give staff the motivation to be with kids. So when you're frustrated that they're not hanging out with their campers when they should be, how do we motivate them to do their jobs, to do it well, and to find the joy in it? All right, Ruby, let's start with you. What have you got?
Okay, so before I talk about motivation, it is The Productivity Project was the book by Chris Bailey. Great read. I remember really kind of shuffled how I thought about productivity. So if you're struggling with productivity right now, if your energy is a little low right this moment as everything needs to get done, I recommend checking out that book. Okay, so when we talk about motivation, you say the word motivation and instantly my head goes to when I took management classes in college. Really, management is about learning how people are motivated. Like we spent a ton of time. We talked about Maslow's hierarchy of needs and then lots of other stuff too about what motivates folks in general. And I think one of the best systems I've seen for helping people articulate how they are motivated is the 4 Tendencies by Gretchen Ruben. Now, we've talked about personality assessments on this podcast before, and this is kind of yet another personality assessment. But it talks about, it really focuses on the tension between internal and external motivation and what drives you and what like turns you off. And it's really fascinating. And the very things that you think you are, I don't know, it reset my thinking a little bit. I am very externally motivated. So like, why do I do a good job in the guide work that I do? Well, I like to see good reviews where I get shouted out for having been a great guide. I like for folks to be appreciative at the end. And the internal motivation is I like for like things to be tight, right? Like maybe I had a plan, maybe we had to veer from the plan, but no matter what, it felt like a good, like front-loaded, total, intentional experience. Been on this podcast too long, right?
Never.
And that's what I think about reflecting back is largely what is the feedback that is going to come back. But for me, that little piece of, did I set out a plan? Did I adjust the plan accordingly? And was it as like tight and solid for the customers as it could have been? And so this is language that I have because I've been working in the industry for a long time and doing lots of guiding and doing lots of facilitating. And your folks that are coming into working at camp may not have ever thought about why they do the things they do. Mm-hmm. In fact, They may have only ever done the stuff they've done because they respect authority a lot and are not rebels and have been told you're going to go to school and you're going to do well, right? And they're like, okay. And they just do it. And they've never really analyzed. Yeah, no, it was me too. They've never really analyzed why they have done well or not in school, or been interested in certain things, or why did they actually apply for this job? Is it just because their parents expected them to, or they've been a camper at this camp forever, and this is just like the next thing that you do? So I would encourage you to look at the 4 tendencies as a system. Super interesting stuff. Gretchen Ruben has a podcast, there's a book, there's lots of ways to engage with this material. But the practical tip that I encourage you to take from this is add to your check-ins what is on your mind. So that will help you understand what are people spinning their wheels on. And it may be taking energy away, or it may be something they're excited about putting energy into, but what's going to help you understand what's motivating them or what's sucking away motivation. And then if you don't get an answer that tells you what they're excited about, I think asking the question, what's fueling you right now? And you may get the answer, fumes, solid fumes.
Yeah.
All that is fueling me right now. And then that provides a great opportunity to say, okay, what can we do so that you're actually running not on empty? Do you need more rest? Do you need more food? Do you need, like, what is it? Or do you need something to be achieving for? I always encouraged my staff at my second check-in of my 3 during the summer to tell me something that by the end of the summer they wanted to be better at. And it could be personal, or it could be professional. It could have nothing to do with camp. It could have everything to do with camp. But what is something that they wanted to be better at by the end of camp? And I told them, and every day I want you to work on that thing. And I had people learn to play songs on guitar. I had people learn how to work with folks that they'd been struggling working with. I had folks that just tried new activities, or folks who locked in on how to teach a certain activity. But by giving them something to focus on, instead of it just being, okay, it's week 6 and I'm just like still doing the same thing. Every day they had a new challenge that they were internally pushing on their own, but they had also externally spoken to me so I could check in with them about it as the summer progressed.
Great. Thank you. 2 good books for us in this podcast from you. All right, Gabrielle, what about you? How do you motivate your staff?
I like to look at like motivation as a scale, and that at the beginning of camp on one end of the scale, the motivation is really, really high. And again, that's that expectation to reality. That's where I think motivation starts to take a hit. So I expect that I'm going to meet my best friend in the first 2 hours. Oh, that didn't happen. The pebble from motivation goes on to the other side. And oh, I don't know where things are. And then there's like the inner self-talk. I wasn't paying attention, pebble goes on to the other side. And the scale starts to tip as days go on. And we can't totally adjust all of the things and make sure that all the pebbles are on the motivation side. But what we can do is help staff members isolate what are the things that they look forward to in a day, and what are the things that they're avoiding in the day. And I know we've talked about this before, but I truly feel that gaining problem solving is one of the ways to move pebbles from one side of the scale to the motivation side of the scale. So if, for example, I'm always not looking forward to meal times. Why is that? Why are we avoiding meal times? Well, because it's really, really loud. That's a typical thing that could happen in a dining room. Do we have headphones on camp that can help stifle some of that noise? Can we move them to another table? Can they have a break? Just once a week might be enough. So problem solving, that piece. Or maybe it's a little bit like I'm having a hard time with this particular camper. So I connect well with all the other campers, but there's one camper I'm having a hard time with. Well, 1, that's really important information for us to know. And then 2, we can problem solve why that is. And then all of a sudden, those weights of, I don't really want to go into the dining room, or I'm not really connecting with his camper, starts to alleviate. And guess what? It also helps you be a support to your staff member. So having reflection times in the morning, buddying up with somebody, and just saying like, this is what I get excited about, this is what I don't, can help with that problem solving. Second is perspective. So sometimes, and this is where feedback is really, really important. Sometimes we don't know we're doing a great job. And there's so many opportunities throughout the day where our staff members are doing very, very well, but they don't see it. And getting feedback from your supervisor is really important, but also getting peer feedback, peer gratitude can help with that perspective. That's really fueling your tank. Having a gratitude circle of what I appreciated about Ruby today, what I appreciated about Beth today. And you don't necessarily need to do it every single day, but having this every third evening, every third staff meeting where you're in a small group and having a gratitude circle that helps with that perspective shift within our own head, because our head can get filled with the things that we start to not fixate on the things that we're not really great at. So know that you're having an impact on somebody can really create that motivation. And guess what? It also builds ties when you do that. So not only do I feel great about myself, but the person that had to think, like, I'm thinking about Beth and how she's impacted me in a positive way, that's actually created a team tie as well. So one is it's looking what we avoid and what we're excited about, and with avoid, problem solve, and then perspective check, and make sure feedback is concrete, but getting peer gratitude can be very helpful.
Great. Thanks, Gab. And I think in addition to that, I think if we can help them solidify their why that Ruby was talking about, why did they come to camp? Why did they do that? And remind them of it often. So in their hiring, again, during training, an exercise where you walk them through how to put it into writing. Why are they working at camp? And they're all going to say all the right things. They're going to say things like, I want to make a difference in the life of a child. I want to be there to help kids navigate the world. I want to teach skills to kids that they need to be successful and kind to people. I want to help campers feel like they're the most special person in the world and that they're loved for exactly who they are. But it's important that they verbalize it, that they hear other people's why, and that they see these whys daily. So I would get them to write them down, stick them in a place where they're going to see them, like the staff lounge, or, the stalls of the toilet in the staff wash house, whatever it is. But the key thing that I learned over summers was not just to leave them there all summer, because at some point they don't read them anymore. Like they just walk right by. So the day that 3 weeks into the summer, I picked them up and moved them and put them, before everybody woke up, and moved them all to a whole new location. Everybody was like,
Yeah, I love that.
oh, and then they started to read them again. It's very powerful to have them verbalize it and then read other people. So make sure you give them the opportunity to do that. Get them to decide in training what they want to feel like at the end of a day, at the end of a week, and have them share those kind of answers in small groups or large group if you have a small staff. And then get them to figure out how they're going to be able to feel that at the end of the day. Get them to verbalize that. How can I feel like I've done a really good job at day's end? Or how can I feel like I impacted someone in a positive way at day's end? The more that you get them to reflect on this, the less you're going to have to remind them not to just hang out with one another when campers are present, but also the more info you're going to have to encourage them to do so. Because you can say things like, Gab, remember when you said da 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 da? Are you finding that in your daily? Are you finding that kind of affirmation? And if you're not, how come? What do we need to rearrange? How can we fix that? And in addition to the gratitude circles, I want you to absolutely celebrate those GMICs. So those great moments in camping at the end of every week or every several days, to inspire them to look for and find and create this magic with kids, and record them so that they can look back on them, or you can read a few special ones out loud when they're having a super tough week. Play a game during training where half of the staff get to be campers and the other half are staff who are only hanging out together. And then separate the two teams and give them each their own instructions secretly, so they don't know what the other team's doing. So tell the campers who are with the staff hearing this that they are the staff. So the staff that are pretending to be staff are not hearing this, that they're going to act like campers. Get them to pick an age group, give them a few minutes to decide what kind of behaviors they think they want to act out. Some can decide maybe that they're going to be shy or missing home or super excited or full of utter energy and bouncing off the walls or bored. And next, without the campers hearing, tell the staff that they're to participate in the game for the first little bit and eventually start to pay more attention to their friends on staff and not the kids. And then debrief the experience. and their thoughts will be interesting to hear. And again, you're just helping them to process what their campers are coming to camp for and how they as staff members can fulfill those needs. Camp is the perfect make work into play and play into workplace. So be sure that you're creating that environment where you look for joy every day. Inspire your staff through training or staff meeting discussions, and of course, through role modeling to make magic happen. And they will get caught up in it along with the campers, and you won't have to be on them to spend more time with their kids. I promise you. I visit a lot of summer camps, and I can tell you within about 15 to 20 minutes of being on site how stressed their staff is, or how much effort they're putting into finding awe and joy in the little things. The other couple of things, two more quick ones, offer them time to be together without the campers. So if you're an overnight program, be sure to offer them time either throughout the day or after campers go to bed to get together and play. And of course, you're going to have to repeat these activities that you plan for your staff so that everybody has a chance to participate, because it's not the 80s anymore and we don't leave campers all alone. But just make sure also with day camp, maybe once a week, you offer these opportunities where they get to stay a little bit later and hang out together. And my final motivation tip is pay them well. Please, please, please understand that they deserve to be paid a decent wage for all of this hard work. They've got expenses to cover at home and or at school, and everything costs more. So be sure you're compensating them properly so they won't feel like they're being used, but rather that they are appreciated fully for all that time that they do spend with their kids. All right. Anything else from anybody before we move on? And now it is time for Gab's famous recap.
Recap. Okay, so what we're talking about is staff stamina, and we're dividing it into two categories, energy and motivation. And if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, if the base bottom line, security, safety, community, that belongs to energy. Motivation, self-esteem, and goal setting, that belongs to motivation. And when we're looking at energy, that baseline is let's make sure they're fed well, that there is actual rest, and that there's a brain break from other campers so that they can just recoup in their little happy bodies. Also, did you know that doing multitasking is actually quite hard, just like saying that word? So we want to create that there's a good lead in and lead out before sessions, before meal times. How are we transitioning in our staff members? And as well as, can we help them practice proper rest? Give them time by themselves. Let them evaluate how that makes them feel. Get them to plan beforehand how they're going to use that time, and reflect afterwards how it made them, feel maybe a little bit more rested. Also, loneliness can be a big contributor when it comes to energy. So team building at the beginning is essential, which leads us into the motivation, self-esteem, and goal setting. Now, I was really excited to hear about Ruby's 4 tendencies, because I think we're going to be adjusting how we're giving feedback to our staff members this summer, because everybody finds motivation in different ways. Ruby's about planning. I am not, but I'm excited to learn what my motivation will look like. We also want to look at perspectives, and so that staff members in their brains are they do see that they're doing a great job. And you can do that with a gratitude circle. And you can also practice what am I avoiding in the day? What am I drawn to? And add in some problem solving. And as Beth has mentioned, let's get them excited about the why. Have them write down why they're all here. Place them up at camp. Change that around and in different parts of camp so that they're excited about it. And, can play a little activity where staff members play campers, and staff members, you could call it campy staffy. But what's most important is that we are celebrating great moments in camping. Energy and motivation is nothing to be afraid of. It's something that we can work towards.
Thanks, Gab. And campy staffy is what I'm going to call it from here on out.
Campy staffy.
All right. So as we wrap up, here is how you can get involved and share your thoughts on this episode or any other Camp Code episode by using the hashtag Camp Code. You can also tell us what topics you would like us to discuss. We've been using all of your topic ideas this particular season. You can let us know any guests you recommend we have on the show, any great leadership training tips that you have to share. We would love to hear from you. And if you found our podcast to be useful, please leave us a rating and review in your favorite podcasting app. And your feedback helps us to keep our show going. So here's how you can reach each one of us if you'd like to do that individually. So Ruby, can we start with you, please?
Sure can. You can email me, ruby@rubyoutdoors.com. You can also follow me on Instagram @rubyoutdoors.
Thank you. And Gabrielle.
And you can follow me at Gabrielle Rail at Instagram. And you can also contact me at info@waro.com.
Thank you. And you can email me at beth@gocamp.pro, or you can find me on Twitter @topaz. For our next podcast, we're going to be talking about teaching and creating ongoing mentoring for staff to be accountable for their own attitudes, responsibilities, conflict, etc. Sounds like a big topic, and it's going to be. So join us for that. Our final segment on each podcast is a best practice for leadership training. And again, we'd love to hear some of your memorable moments or most effective tips. And this week, our best practice comes from Ruby.
Okay, I've been teaching a lot of wilderness survival lately with my guiding job. And one of the things that we teach in that class is the 5 ways that a body loses heat. And as we've been talking today, I think there's a really easy way to take those ideas and convert them into a metaphor about how we lose energy, and then using that as a way to get your staff to not only learn about how to prevent hypothermia, which is very common at a lot of camps because the lakes are cold or it rains, but also gets them to think about how they can insulate themselves and help retain some of that energy. Okay, crazy, right? This is fun. All right, so first of all, you have radiation, which is just your heat that you lose from exposed skin. And I think a really nice connection to this is the energy that we lose just from being vulnerable. We're at camp all the time, and you got to show your skin sometimes. And being vulnerable requires some energy, and some energy loss happens there. Number 2 is convection, which is heat lost from wind displacing a layer of warm air near your skin. So basically like the wind goes by you and takes heat with it. Check it out. Camp is a community environment, and it's just draining and it will pull energy from you just being there, even though it recharges us some too. Being in a community around other people all the time, yes, we got to combat that loneliness, but it also will pull, even if you're the biggest extrovert like me, it will pull your energy from you just by being there. Number 3, evaporation. This is heat loss when the body loses water from sweating. So yes, we lose energy when we work hard, and we're going to have to do that at camp this summer. Number 4 is conduction, which is heat lost through contact with a colder object, such as cold floors or ground. So we are going to have to give energy to other folks to maintain their moods, or to uplift them, or get them excited about something they're not super excited about. And that requires more effort and is draining our energy tank. And lastly, this one's kind of annoying: respiration. We lose heat when we breathe, especially when we breathe cold air. That's right, you're going to lose energy just by maintaining the status quo. And so making sure we tell folks that at camp, teaching our staff that just by being, we are losing energy. You wake up in the morning and your energy tanks start to drop. And so now you can take that metaphor and then ask your staff, how can they insulate from that energy loss? Some of it's unavoidable, and some of it, there are things that they can do to help hold some of that energy in or regulate that loss so that it's more even throughout the day.
And well, that was just utterly brilliant. Thank you, Ruby. That was great. All right. So Camp Code is part of the Go Camp Pro podcast network, and you can check out all our other podcasts at gocamp.pro/podcasts, of course. There are 7 in all, each one with a different focus, so that we can help as many camp folks as possible. From all of us here at Camp Code, thanks for the listening, friends.